Well, what we're going to cover tonight is a very interesting subject. At least it is to me. I think it will be to you as well, because so much of what happens in America is dependent really upon Baptist people understanding their own heritage. One of the reasons why our country is in the condition that it is in today, which it is schizophrenic in a sense. Our country can't decide whether it's socialist or fascist. And seriously, and the truth is we're not supposed to be either. We're supposed to have a republic here. And because we're so detached from it, Solzhenitsyn, who's the great Russian writer, he said that in order to destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. So if you sever the roots of American liberty, and we don't understand what it is or where it came from, it's possible for us to be so far off course that we cannot seem to bring ourselves back to the truth of the matter. Christian people have been sort of morphed into this idea that they're married to one political party, and that they will go with that political party all the way down into the cesspool. And we cannot, listen folks, if we are married to either one of these political parties, we make a very, very grave error. Because we'll begin to be ruled by a party rather than be ruled by principle. We have to be ruled by principle, or else we're going to be destroyed by our own emotions. So what I want to give you tonight is basically the principles of American government as they were delivered by our Baptist forefathers, dissenter forefathers, and so forth. So we're just going to dig right in. Let's have a word of prayer, and we'll just go after it. Amen? Okay, let's pray. Father, we pray that you would help us now, Lord. It's easy to get lost when you don't have a compass. And Lord, our compass for our personal lives and our walk with you, that first table of the law, our personal relationship with you, that compass is the entire word, Lord, that you've given us. And it keeps us, Lord, doing the right things. It keeps us in the right church. It keeps our church straight. It keeps our preachers straight. And we are very, very grateful for this. But Lord, we also have a compass concerning our civil government, which our forefathers put together. And it's a good compact. It is a good agreement that we have. We simply have to recognize what it enables the government to do and what the restrictions are. And if we will understand this, Lord, it will help us elect better people, I think, and help us to better articulate what our stance is and what it ought to be in the public arena. So we pray that you would help us, Lord, please, to get this to understand it. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. Two things before I begin turning the pages here. In the 1880s, there was a concern in America that somehow we might lose our principles because of the number of immigrants that were coming into the major cities across America. My heritage goes back through German immigration, coming from Germany. They were all Lutherans that came into the St. Louis area. They were dairy farmers. Numbers of them came into the St. Louis area. However, others of our family came from the Bavarian section of Germany, and they were all Roman Catholic, and they invaded the St. Louis area, Chicago, and other major cities across the country, to the place where there were so many Roman Catholics in the cities that there was a concern that these Catholics would not understand the American system of government. Now, that might come as a shock to you, but that was a very real fear in the middle of the 19th century, because the Catholic Church had been in control of Europe for over 1,000 years under what we call the Dark Ages, where there was a marriage of church and state between the Catholic Church and these civil governments.
Right.
And the American people were very concerned that these Catholics that were coming into the country would not they weren't being prejudiced just because they were Catholics. They had some very vital concern that these people would not understand what it meant to be in America.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happened that hardly anyone knows about, and it's terrible that Baptist people don't understand this, but one of the things that happened was there were senators and congressmen that were encouraging different Baptist preachers to go across the country and lecture on Americanism. Now, Americanism is not, well, I'm waving a flag, so I'm American. No, Americanism has to do with principles. Not just a patriotic feeling, but real solid principles that guide the way we govern ourselves. And so one of the most famous Baptist preachers that did that was a man named J.T. Christian. It may interest you to know that J.T. Christian spoke to a crowd of 10,000 in Philadelphia at the old Philadelphia Forum in 1880, where he spoke on America or Rome, which, and a huge number of Roman Catholics came to hear him speak, and he began to explain the principles of American government and how the American ideal of government is so every man's conscience should be free, and you can decide in your heart how you believe about God. Nobody's going to force God, and we don't want you to come and force your God on us either. And a number of Catholics at his meetings wanted to know more about the Bible as a result of what he said about civil government. And a little revival took place among a number of Catholic people. Now, it is a demonstrable fact that the Catholic Church tweaked its belief about civil government when this large number of Catholics came to America. Because when was the last time you heard a Catholic say, we have to establish Catholicism as the national religion? It's been a while for them to do that. They don't believe that way any longer. They do believe that way in Mexico, but that they don't believe that way here simply because the argument was made, it was articulated properly across the country, and it brought down, it tempered the Catholic idea of civil government. Y'all understand what I'm saying? The same thing now needs to be done with the Muslims. They need to understand that they can't come here and establish Sharia law because it will violate some of our vital principles as Americans. If they want to go to some country and defend their own country and build their own country, fine. But as long as they're going to come here to America, they need to learn how to be Americans.
Amen.
Now, instead of us being emotional and wanting to blow these people up, we might want to think about, and them blowing us up, what we might want to think about is educating these people and letting them understand that if they understand the way our system works, that they'll bring themselves to understand what these principles are and how they work, then we can coexist, we can live together, and we won't have to kill each other. Wouldn't that be a good thing? You reckon Jesus might be for that? You reckon Jesus might be for us actually trying to win these folks to Christ?
Amen.
He might really want that. Okay, all right. Oh, he wants us to kill them. Okay. Well, I hope you can see this. You can read this. I don't know if we can get a little darker up here. Can we, preacher? Is this okay the way it is? Can y'all see this okay? All right, this is Time Magazine. This was an article that appeared about a year ago. If you can believe this. Time Magazine writes this article. Preacher, it's okay. I'm okay if you're okay.
Okay,
We're both okay. Don't you feel the love? I'm okay and you're okay. All right.
You, brother. You say not until later, though.
All right. But anyway, look at the title of this. This was in Time Magazine. This is the Constitution, by the way, on the cover of Time Magazine. And the question is, does it still matter? Huh. Does it still matter? What kind of a question is that? Of course it still matters. As a matter of fact, it's the only thing that does matter concerning politics in this country. It is our civil Bible that we go by. If we're going to throw the Constitution out, and we've done a lot of that in the last 20 years in this country, then we better be ready to reinstate something so that we don't drop into anarchy. Of course it still matters. But the problem is a lot of Americans really don't understand it. They don't know where it came from. They don't know what the foundation of it is. And that's what I'm here to try to explain tonight. Here's the question. You know, there's a debate tonight. I'm glad you folks came to this instead of staying home and watching the debate. It's like the 50th debate or something, right? They debate every day, don't they? They debate in the bathroom, they debate down at they debate everywhere. And you would think, you know, in the debate that this question would come up because really it is the heart of our confusion. And that question is, what is the role of government? If I were to say, okay, I'm going to lecture tonight on what the role of a citizen is, it would be meaningless for us to say what your role is if you don't know what the role of government is first. That's kind of like saying, okay, I want you to be an engineer. Well, what do? Just get out there and be an engineer. Well, unless you know the parameters and you know exactly what your duties are and what you're trying to build, you're never going to be able to engineer anything. And you can't be a good citizen either if you don't understand what the role of government in civil society is. I got a letter from a fellow. He said, you know, I'm a part of a religious organization, part of the religious right. And what he is, he's with a group of pastors that are trying to influence legislation in a certain state. And there's one guy that kind of heads up this group, you know, and he sent a letter to all of the pastors that are part of this group. Well, the guys are, and what he said was very interesting. He said, we all know what the role of government is. And I'm thinking, we do. We do. We all know. No, we don't. But anyway, he writes, we all know the role of government. The role of government is to, and then he began to talk about morality. The role of government is to boost up morality and push up the truth, blah, blah. And actually what he was doing was giving the role of the church. Yeah. Now, the church, local churches, we know the church is supposed to be the pillar and the ground of the truth. Yeah. So the church, and church is here, where I'm talking about the local church, is supposed to push up the truth in the community. That's our job, to push up the truth. It is not the job of government to push up the truth. Do you know that it's not even really the role of government to try to reinforce the truth? The government has a role, but it's not in religious affairs. Right. It's not. Don't look at me like that. Okay. Say, I've been reading this about John Calvin. You might want to rearrange your reading schedule here a little bit. John Calvin did not found America, okay? He didn't. And his precepts of civil government caused an incredible amount of tyranny in Europe for a long, long time. And if you don't know about that, I encourage you to get some of our books. Here comes your Walmart push, your blue light special on the table back there. You cannot leave until all those books are sold. But anyway, and it'll help you get a little bit of the background. What I want to give you is a background of what led up to the Declaration of Independence, so that you understand where the Declaration came from, so that you can understand exactly what our forefathers understood as the role of government. Tonight at the debate, no one's going to ask the question. You know, Brooks Santorum, what is the role of government? Well, the role of government is to get everybody saved. Who's in it anymore? Rick Perry just dropped out. They asked Rick Perry, what's the role of government? Well, the role of government is to kill as many quail as you can. And I don't know. You might as well say that. Because those that understand the role of government are not really running for office. Not much. I can find, there's one candidate that I think understands the role of government. And I'm not here to push that tonight, but you have to think for yourself and figure out, if you understand what the role of government is, maybe you can make better decisions. Or let's put it this way, if you understand the role of government, you can ask the right questions. We had a fellow come in, a state senator. He's a good man, young man, very young man. He's a Marine, served over in Afghanistan, came back, and he ran for state senator. We supported him, helped him, and he got elected. And I had him come in and address our veterans. Every year we have a veterans service at our church. We invite all the veterans from the area. It's an incredible thing. We've had as many as 300 veterans jammed into our fellowship hall. We feed them a meal. And then we do a patriotic service and we preach the gospel to them. It's just the neatest thing. A lot of them come every year. I'm like their Veterans Day pastor. We had this young man come and speak to the veterans. He's a Marine. And he was speaking, did a great job. And after it was over, I said, you know, that was really good. Boy, I'd like to sit down sometime and talk to you about the role of government. And he looked at me and he said, what is the role of government? I said, you're asking me what the role of government is? He said, yeah, what do you think it is? I said, I'm not going to tell you. I'll wait till later. We'll go over this in great detail. But I tell you, he's probably, I know he's not alone in the people that run for office. They have no idea what their role is. Can you imagine? The government actually thinks they're supposed to feed us. They think that they're supposed to provide our education for us. They think that they're supposed to, watch over and make sure that our crops, are perfect. They're supposed to watch over and make sure there's no lead in our candy. They're supposed to make sure that nobody breathes on us funny. They're there to make sure nobody is blowing smoke gas. They think that those are their rules, but it's not. It's not their rule. Andrew Jackson said this, and I love this quote. Jackson said, "The best kind of government is the kind that operates in such a way that you don't even know it's there."
Amen.
Oh, for the day. Have you ever tried to start a business? Believe me, you know the government's there. Yeah, I was preaching in Minnesota, and along these lines, and this lady came up, and she said, "My husband and I are going out of business." She said, "We were in business for 20 years. We made stoves. They made wood stoves." And she showed me a brochure, beautiful wood stoves. And she said, "You know, we've made these for 20 some odd years. We've made a good living doing this. We have to shut it down." She said, "You want to know why?" I said, "It has to do with some government agency, right?" She said, "Yeah. It's the EPA. They say that our stoves, underneath our stoves, have a certain kind of wood that's protected wood. We can't use that wood any longer." And so what they did is they yanked every stove that we had that was for sale in New England. It destroyed us financially. There's nothing left of our business because they destroyed our business through their rules, not laws, rules. Okay? That, my friends, is when the government does too much. Okay? It's not really doing its role. The government we have in this country is no longer the same government that we started. It's way out of control. And if we don't do something about it soon, we're going to have more problems than we have right now. All right, so let's get into this. What is the role of government in a free society? That's our question, okay? Let me give you a couple of definitions here for a little lecture here tonight. I'm going to talk about the first and second table. It's very important for all of us to understand this, because if we don't understand it, we won't understand how this government that we have is supposed to operate. The first table, and of course, this is talking about the Ten Commandments. And the first table of the Ten Commandments, of course, the first 5 commandments have to do with, well, I'll get into that in a minute. It has to do with man's relationship with God. The second table has to do with man's relationship with his fellow man. Okay? Then I want you to understand what the word unalienable means, okay? Because this is something that our forefathers talked about, our American forefathers talked about the fact that we have certain unalienable rights. And what that means is that these are rights that belong to us by nature, that God has given us these rights. So government doesn't grant any rights, doesn't give us any rights. Okay? God is the one who gives us the rights. That's important. We'll show you in a minute why that's important. And then I want you to understand what the primary unalienable right is. And Jefferson said that the primary unalienable right is religious liberty. He said that's the most important of all of our rights. It's what he called and what I call the primary unalienable right. And then something that I call the Triune Principle. We're going to cover all these things in this little lecture right here. And this principle has to do with the second table of the law. The primary unalienable right has to do with the first table of the law. The Triune Principle has to do with the second table of the law. And this is where we understand what government ought to do and what it ought not to do. What is government? What is it? Well, if you own a small engine, you know what a governor is, right? My dad used to, on the side, used to fix lawnmowers. And he would always check the governor first to see if there's something wrong with the governor. The governor is that little screw in here that it determines how much gasoline goes through the little carburetor. If you have too much gasoline going through the carburetor, you could blow up the engine pretty easy, a little small engine. So the governor is very important. What does the governor do? It controls. And government controls. I've heard people say government is force. Well, maybe, but it's control. You know, you can control people just by scaring them. You know, the government is control. That's what it does. It's trying to control. Now, what does government control as far as we're concerned? Well, there's only a handful of remunerated powers in the Constitution that tells us what government's supposed to control. And we're not even going to get into that tonight. What I want you to understand is that this control, the government that is in control, has very little power in our society. It's supposed to have very limited, small powers.
Right.
All right? Very limited. Okay, I want to ask you a question. You know, as far as this control grid that we have, we'll take the example of this lady and this fellow that lost their business because the government came in and said that the wood was couldn't use that type of wood, and they shut down their business. We're talking about controlling something that doesn't really need to be controlled. It's not hurting anybody. They just love to control.
Right.
When Ronald Reagan ran for the presidency, and he first ran in 76, and then, he ran in 80 and he won. Well, at that time, he began this whole idea the government's too big and I'm trying to get government off the back of people. And that's why people elected him. They love the fact that, maybe we're going to get the government out of our hair. Did you know that in 1980, here's the size of the American government. You ready for this? In 1980, there were 2 million federal employees. 2 million of them! All right, you want to know how many federal employees there are now? Because, every year these guys tell us they're going to reduce government. So they've done such a good job that we've been reduced from 2 million federal employees to 4 million federal employees. What a good job, guys. We appreciate you, and you wonder why we don't like you. Because you lie.
That's right.
And you steal from us. That's what we don't like. Reckon? Huh? What's the matter with you people? I remember Claire McCaskill, state senator from Missouri. She was having this meeting, and she's talking to these folks, and she said, "We are going to do this. We're going to take care of this." And the crowd just looked at her funny. She recognized that they looked at her funny, and she said, "What? You don't trust me?" And the whole crowd said, "No!" That was a great day in American politics. The government can become a control-freak organization. Control. All right, now, who is responsible for forming government? Now, you folks are Christians. I'm not going to have you raise your hand because I know what will happen. I'll say, who do you think is responsible for forming civil government? And a lot of you folks, well-intentioned, you'll raise your hand and you say, well, it's God. God forms civil government. Is that right? Show me in the Bible where God ever said that he was going to form a civil government. The only time that God ever formed a civil government was Israel.
That's right.
And that was a perfect marriage of church and state. The church was God.
Yeah.
And the state was God. It was a perfect... Amen? And so many times you have, what about Miss 13? The powers that be are created by God. No, they're not. You quoted the verse wrong. I just did. I quoted the verse wrong. No. Man is responsible to form a human government. It's our responsibility. Don't look at me like that. It's our responsibility. Oh, come on. You're not thinking. Okay, look, when God gave you the responsibility to rear your children, do you expect him to come down to your living room and control your children? Do you? Well, of course you don't. Why? Because it's your responsibility. So when he left us in responsibility, the responsibility to form civil government, he expects us to do it. And listen, if we let just any tyrant do it, we're going to get what we deserve.
Amen.
Okay, you say, prove it from the scripture. I'll show you. Okay, look at this. The first time civil government is mentioned is in Genesis 9. It's also mentioned in Daniel 7. But in Genesis 9, this is very interesting. In Genesis 9, verse number 5, we find the Lord telling his creation. He says, surely the blood of your lives will I require at the hand of every beast. He's talking about murder here. He's talking about when a beast destroys another human being, you should destroy the beast. And then in verse number 6 here of Genesis 9, he says, Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. Who has the responsibility to carry out capital punishment? Man does. Okay, now sometimes God does it. But it is our responsibility. Okay? So this is the first mention, actually, of civil government in the Bible, because this is talking about controlling people that are out of control. And this person has taken the life of another person, so we take that life so that he doesn't do it again. Okay? Y'all understand?
Yeah.
That's civil government. Okay? And mankind has the opportunity. Now this is interesting over here in Daniel 7. And for those of you that know a little bit about the Bible, in Daniel 7, you have four different worldwide governments that are mentioned. There's four of them altogether, and I'm not even going to get into that. These are worldwide powers. But isn't it interesting? that every last one of these governments are described as a beast. So what we have here is yes, it's our responsibility, but every time we form government, at best, it is a beast. And this is why Thomas Jefferson, isn't that something? This is why Jefferson said that we need to chain down the government with the chains of the Constitution. Why? Because he knew fully well that no matter how good that government was formed, eventually it could go out of control and eat every last one of us. And that's exactly what's happening to us. If you can't see it, you're blind. And it's not going to stop until we stop it.
That's right.
It's not. You think, oh, it's going to get better. We'll just elect a Republican. Give me a break.
Amen.
No, it's not going to stop. Are you kidding me? These entitlements are going to keep going and going and going and going. It's going to be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Amen. We have 4 million federal employees. You think it's time to stop?
Okay. Amen. Sir.
My soul. You know, this is amazing, Brother Kaiser. Did you know that there's 162,000 border patrolmen? What I want to know is, what are they doing? Exactly. I mean, at that rate, you could put them like every 200 feet, couldn't you? Well, okay, I got mine. You got yours? Yeah, I got mine. Anything going on over there? No, nothing. How about Henry over there? Henry, how you doing? I'm doing fine. All along the border, 162,000 of them just standing there. You think they could do it? Okay. It's beastly, you know. As a matter of fact, the last beast described in Daniel 7 is so incredibly horrible that Daniel can't even describe it. It's like, this beast is like no other. I mean, you know, you got a bear, that's pretty bad. I don't want to run into a bear. You know, you got a leopard, that's pretty bad. Rawr, you know, the last one's so bad I can't even describe it to you. That is human government. It's necessary, but if we don't keep it in check, it's a beast. I want to remind you that the Antichrist is described as a beast.
Amen.
All right? Now, what is the role of government? Let's get back to this. Okay, so we know that we have to form it. We know that we form it. And we know that it is beastly. So what is its role? What do we need to do? We need to be careful to have the proper role. This is a depiction of the sinking of a British frigate called the Gaspee. This took place in 1772. It's a very interesting story. Because it was Baptists that blew the ship up. Amen. Don't worry, ladies. No one died. But it was Baptists that blew it up. And you have to ask yourself, why would a group of Baptists blow this ship up? This is 1772. After this happened, Samuel Adams wrote in his diary that the sinking of the Gaspee had caused his patriotic feelings, emotions, to rise to the surface. It was that influential in the life of that great American patriot who we all know. But what in the world caused these Baptist people to do this? You know, Baptists are always meek and mild and, you know, and leave us alone and all that sort of thing. Well, there was a reason why the Gaspee... I missed something. There was a reason why. I'm going to give you the story of this. This is pretty incredible because the Gaspee was a schooner that was going up the eastern coast of New England. And a lot of folks don't know this, but Rhode Island had its own charter. It was separated from England before there ever was a United States. And Rhode Island was founded by a group of Baptist people that had been oppressed for a long, long time. And Rhode Island, they individually established ties with China. And they were trading with China, if you can believe this. You know, they were trading with China and they were sending their ships out of Providence Bay and sending their ships down filled with goods, teas, and all kinds of things. And what the British were doing is they were stopping the ships that were coming out of Providence and they were stealing the goods out of the ships. And the men of Providence, men like the Brown brothers, Chad Brown, and so forth. These men, the men that founded Brown College, and other Baptist men got together and they said, we cannot put up with this. This is our property they're stealing here. And what are we going to do about it? And they prayed. They said, Lord, if you give us an opportunity, we'll take this schooner out. Well, one night, by divine providence, the schooner got stuck on a sandbar. And the men of Providence, word got out, that the Gatsby's stuck on the sandbar. These men got together. You can see, I don't know if you can see this, there's 6 or 7 of these boats. They came out, they commandeered the Gatsby, they took their crew, held their crew hostage, and then they blew that sucker up. Kaboom! In Christian love. Now, why would they do this? Why would they do this? There's a reason. They didn't do it because they were rebels. They didn't do it because they were bad people. They did it because they were sick of something. And if you go back in history, you find out the mindset of these dissenters, what their mindset was. You go back to New England from 1620 to 1776, and we find these people are oppressed. They've been oppressed for a long, long time. Over 140 years they were oppressed by the local governments under British influence, under the influence of the Anglican Church. Okay? They were oppressed. We find Baptists and other dissenters suffered under the theology of the government of New England. New England was a marriage of church and state. If you were not a part of that church, which was the Congregational Church, you suffered as a result of it. Right here in America. Right here in America. I'm telling you, if you don't understand this, you're not going to understand your own country. We go back to men like John Wycliffe, Leonard Busher. These are the years these men wrote about liberty. They were saying that a man's conscience cannot be held hostage by a government or by a so-called church. And there's tremendous writers, Roger Williams. These folks are all interlocked in the way they believe. John Wycliffe, Leonard Busher. There was an anonymous prisoner who I'm going to show you in just a minute, a little bit about his life. And then Roger Williams, taking from the words of the anonymous prisoner. John Locke borrowing from Roger Williams, and Thomas Jefferson borrowing from Williams and Locke. And I'm going to get ahead of myself. All right, so remember this. That as late as 1612, Edward Whiteman, who was a Baptist preacher, was jailed in Wales, in England, and jailed there because he preached against infant baptism. They burned him at the stake. He was the last Baptist to be burned in England in 1612. That really wasn't that long ago, folks.
That's right.
It really wasn't. So something happened between that time and this time. We have such toleration and such liberty. Look what Leonard Busher read. Now, Leonard Busher was a Baptist preacher. He went to jail, and he went to jail for his faith. And so he wrote a letter to the King of England. And in this letter, he makes this statement to the king. He says, "Suffer not your bishops." What's he talking about, your bishop? He's talking about the King of England's bishops. There was a marriage of church and state. And he said, don't let your bishops destroy those men and women that strive to serve God, but let them enjoy freedom of the gospel and liberty of conscience. In other words, King, just let us have our liberty. We're not going to hurt you. All we want is to be able to believe and preach the way we think is right from the Word of God. Well, the king ignored it. And he kept putting people in prison. This is a very famous man, but we don't know his name. He's the anonymous prisoner of Newgate. And in 1620, he wrote a treatise that was smuggled out, very similar to John Bunyan. And he wrote this treatise in which he pled for his liberty. He begs the king's pardon. He says to the king, King, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a good, loyal subject. All I'm asking you is, can I preach the truth as I see it? I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm not going to jail anybody. I'm not going to hurt their persons. I'm not going to take from them. All I'm going to do is tell the truth. Please let me have my liberty. And of course, the king did not allow him to have his liberty. But what he wrote appeared in Parliament and so forth. So here's what the anonymous prisoner said while he was in prison in 1620. And just listen to this. He says, it's not in your power to compel the heart, talking to the king. The violence of persecuting the body of any man only for the cause of conscience is against the Word of God. And this is the truth, my friends.
That's right.
Look, I have 4 children, but you know what? I couldn't have forced them to believe anything.
That's right.
The Holy Spirit had to help me. I can teach them the truth, but I can't force them. I can make them obey me, but I can't do anything in their hearts.
That's right.
And when we have a religion that forces people, all we do is create hypocrites. Boy, I'd love to have a sword of the word Sunday where I go to people's house, take out a sword and say, believe or you're going to die. Do you believe that you, yes, I believe, okay, you're going to live. And I can mark it down on my soul-winning activity as being somebody that But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Well, this is important. This anonymous prisoner writing this treatise, what he wrote fell into the hands of Roger Williams. And Williams is very important in American history. Okay, Williams took this letter, this treatise that the anonymous prisoner wrote, and he defended it in a book called The Bloody Tenant of Persecution. Okay? All right, America was held hostage by this theology. All right, here's Williams taking the words of the anonymous prisoner, and this book, The Bloody Tenant of Persecution, was Williams' defense that was written by the anonymous prisoner. So he defended it in this book. This book was condemned by the Puritans. Why? Because the Puritans believed in a marriage of church and state, and they didn't want anybody operating outside of their jurisdiction.
Right.
Okay? They didn't understand the role of government.
Amen.
They thought the role of government was to control people's consciences and control their lives. So Williams pleads, and he says a couple of tremendous things in his pleadings. And this book was published. Williams opposed three things in this book he wrote. First of all, he opposed the oath of a free man. Okay. Now, the oath of a free man sounds like it would be a good thing. The problem is this oath that they took separated them from England, but it made them subjects of the Congregational Church. And Williams said, we can't force people into the church. If we force people into the church, all we're going to do is make hypocrites out of them. Well, that didn't sit too well with the Puritans. They didn't like it. He also opposed the divine right of kings. In other words, you don't go into some land and just because you conquer it becomes your property. He literally purchased the island of Rhode Island from the Indians. He didn't go in there and say it's conquered land, all you boys go west. He didn't do that. He said, we want to come in, we want to buy the land, and they willingly sold it to him. How do you like that?
Amen.
You reckon maybe he was a Christian or something? Okay. Then, he also opposed, and here's my message. He also opposed the enforcement of the first table of the law. Okay. I want to get into what that means in just a second, but I wonder if anybody has any questions so far what we're looking at. Anybody? Brother, could I trouble you for another water? Any questions about what we looked at so far? It's a lot of information. All right, I must be doing a stellar job of explaining this, okay? All right. All right, so he was opposed to the enforcing of the first table of the law. That's interesting. Now, because he opposed the first table, remember we said the first table was the first 5 commandments? Remember? And the Puritans said, we're going to enforce that first table. That's why they put people in jail for bringing their child to infant baptism.
Right.
You know, they enforced their church-state marriage on people. And William said, no, this needs to be separate law here. Okay? But anyway, his stance brought him into conflict with the Massachusetts leaders of the theocracy that was there with the Puritans, marriage of church and state. So here's what they did to him. Williams was disarmed, disfranchised, and banished. And this was true of any baptized believer at the time, that they refused to bring their child to infant baptism. This is what happened, okay? Is this your wife over here? Okay, and how old is your oldest? 19? Okay, it's a boy or a girl? Boy. Okay, when he was born, nobody came to your house and asked you when you were going to bring him to infant baptism, did they? Okay. Do you know that if you lived in New England in 1620, they would have done exactly that? They would come to you and they would have said, when are you going to bring this baby to infant baptism. And if you don't bring this baby to infant baptism, he's not even going to be a citizen of the Commonwealth. You don't want to do that now, do you? And 3 things would happen. That's a lot of pressure. So 3 things happened to Williams, the same thing that happened to anybody that refused infant. Are you listening to this?
Amen.
Anybody that refused infant baptism, they were disarmed. In other words, they took their weapons away from them. And this, of course, is the root meaning of the Second Amendment. Because if you take somebody's weapon away from them in the American wilderness, they become very vulnerable and they can't even provide for their own families.
Amen.
So he was disarmed, and so was any person, lady, family, whatever. They were disarmed. Secondly, they were disfranchised, which means they couldn't buy or sell. Who's that sound like? The Antichrist, right? No wonder our New England Baptist brethren called the Puritan establishment the infant baptism the badge of the whore, the badge of the Antichrist. Because what happened to them is exactly what the Antichrist is going to do to this entire world if they don't get initiated into his religion.
Right.
This is why Baptist people have to get it right so that we can stand against Antichrist until the time that the Lord comes and gets us.
Amen.
And then thirdly, Williams was banished. So to be banished to the American wilderness without a weapon and without the ability to buy or sell a weapon, you now have practically got a death sentence on your hands. Okay, and this was true. It wasn't just Williams. There were other people that were banished as well, but he was the one that was most hated. But notice what Williams said in his booklet, and I love this. Okay, you tell me if this sounds familiar. It should. Williams said this in the bloody defense of the persecution. He said, "If people may erect and establish what form of government seems to them most meet for their civil condition. The civil power of people consenting and agreeing shall be trusted with." In other words, people can set up a government according to the consent of the government.
Right.
What's that sound like? It sounds really familiar, you know? And you say, well, come on. Everybody knows that. At the time, not everybody knew that. This was outrageous for him to say such a thing like that. And immediately, people called for his execution. He was banished. But this statement sounds familiar. It sounds like this. Here's Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, 1776. We all know him. Here's what Jefferson said. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government.
Amen.
Okay, anybody know what document that is? Raise your hand if you get. Do you know what is that document?
Declaration of Independence.
The Declaration of Independence. How many of you, you'll be honest, you knew it was the Declaration of Independence? Raise your hand. And that's about average. I'll have 100 people sitting out there and 3 will know. I have 200 people, 6 will know. About 3% of the people can recognize this most important phrase. And I'm talking about among Baptist people in good Baptist churches. By the way, the same thing was true of colleges. I mean, I had 50 college students out there asking if they recognize this, and 1 or 2 will know. I have 300 college students out there, and 3 will know. Maybe 6. Around 2 to 3% can recognize this. And this, my friends, is the result of our Christian education. Yes, it is. Do you know that the initial book on American history that was put out by Becca didn't even have the Declaration of Independence in it? You say, why? There's a lot of reasons for that. But let's just say it this way. If we're ignorant of this most important document, because it was the document that separated us from our relationship with England, and every American young person should understand, especially this phrase, and understand that it came from a group of people that were beaten and banished and hung out to dry. Your forefathers.
Right.
Okay, I'm not trying to say that Baptist people are better. That's ridiculous. We're just made out of dirt like everybody else, so one piece of dirt's not better than another piece of dirt. However, our principles are better.
Amen.
And if our principles aren't, and they're only better because they're scriptural.
Right.
Okay, now, if you say, well, and if they're not better, then go be a Methodist.
That's right.
Go on. Okay? If they're not better, then go be a Presbyterian and prove to me that Presbyterian principles are better.
Right.
But what we're trying to say is that this is where this came from, and our children should know this, But you should know this so that you can articulate these. Not so much that you can say, well, it's because of Baptists. No. So that you can know that this idea of liberty came from an incredible battle for the heart and the mind. The heart and the mind. Amen? There was a battle for this. It just didn't happen. It wasn't something that one day we woke up and we had liberty in America. No, that's not how it happened. A lot of people suffered so that we can enjoy this liberty that we're supposed to be enjoying. We're about to listen because we don't know the facts as we should. So here's Jefferson. I went to Washington, D.C. with my son to sit down with the head of the history department at Harvard. He has an office in Washington, D.C. And we tried to make an arrangement to film him, put him on film, and do an interview with him, because he had said many things about dissenters and dissenter history that you don't read in the average Christian history, that's for sure not a secular history book. And I was reading it, and it occurred to me that Dr. David Little, who is this head of the history department at Harvard, was recognizing the contributions of the Baptists concerning our liberty. So my son and I drove out to Washington. We sat down with him for an hour in his living room and filmed him, and I asked him questions about American liberty, and I asked him flat out, what was the role of the Baptists in establishing liberty in America? And he said they were at the forefront. Basically, he said they are the reason why we have liberty. Because if it hadn't been for their battle, we would be an established religionist state similar to England, and that's absolutely the truth. We would have established the Congregational Church or the Presbyterian Church, and then we, who are Baptists, would just be tolerated in society. But there's a difference between toleration and liberty. Come on, you know there is. Toleration means that I'm in control of you and I just let you do what you do. Liberty is we all have freedom to do, freedom to believe, as we feel in our hearts. Amen. In our civil society. Again, we're not talking about church government here. You can't come into this church and join the church, and the preacher asks you, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? You say, no, he just runs a McDonald's. He's not going to be a member of your church. That is ecclesiastical government. But he can still be an American and believe that God is dead. Right. And still be an American. Does this shock you? You've been listening to the radio coverage. Come on. Of course he can be an American. Right? If he can agree to our compact, he can be an American. Yes, he can. Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. So, anyway, Jefferson said, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers. So there is a consent clause here. All right, here's Obadiah Holmes. He couldn't consent to the marriage of church and state in Boston, and so he was beaten as a result of it. Okay, this is 1651. He's not the only one that suffered like this. There are many, many other American Baptist people who suffered in New England at the hand of the Puritans. Amen? Yeah, it's just a fact. I'm not trying. There's no sense in trying to whitewash this. It happened. I say, well, I'm going to write me a Christian history book, and I'm going to make sure that I don't mention any bad things that the Puritans did. Congratulations! Now we don't know why we have liberty or where it came from. We have to report this. We have to talk about it. It was your forefathers that suffered as a result of it. So here's Obadiah Holmes being beat for your liberty and mine. And in this crowd, it's an amazing story. I don't have time to go into it. But get American Crimson Red and read about this. Okay. And anyway, 1651. My friends, that is yesterday as far as history is concerned. Why was he beaten? Okay, he was beaten because he refused the control of the Congregational Church. Now here's a historian named J.Q. Adams, not the president. He is a historian, Baptist theologian from the 19th century. And he made this outlandish statement. He said, American principles are essentially Baptist principles. Baptist principles are the only principles consistent with civil and religious liberty. Okay? Well, how? How did that happen? All right. Remember our question? What is the role of government in a free society? Remember that question? How many of you remember that question? Good, I don't feel like a failure. I feel like I succeeded. Okay, all right. What about that question? Well, there's a twofold answer to that question. It's summed up in two statements. When we talk about the role of government, we're talking about two separate statements, and the first one has to do with the primary unalienable right of religious liberty. Jefferson said, freedom of religion is the most sacred of all unalienable rights. Okay, so that's the first part of it. You see, okay, all right. Then the second part of it has to do with what I call the Triune Principle. Now, what is that Triune Principle? Now, when I show you this, you're going to recognize the Triune Principle. You've heard it before. Maybe you don't understand where it came from. But the Triune Principle goes something like this. And please, bear with me, as this took me several days to do this on... What is this called? PowerPoint. So you PowerPoint people, you should give me a pat on the back when you see this, all right? The Triune... Oh, I know, it's amazing. Okay, watch this. Oh, yeah, okay. All right. All right, so the Triune Principle... Okay, look at that. I know. The Triune Principle is all about life, liberty, and property. And if you thought that was something, you know, they all work together. I know it. They all work together. They work together in civil society. They work together, okay. But where did they come from? Where does the idea of life, liberty, and property come from? As you know, the Declaration of Independence talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is also identified in every major periodical of the day, that the pursuit of happiness has to do with property. Okay? You say, boy, that's awful worldly. Well, what is your pursuit of happiness, Christian? What are you pursuing? Aren't you wanting to walk with God and live for God? Isn't that your happiness? Amen. So this is not a false statement at all. You know, don't you want to have a home, a house for your family? Of course you do. It's in all of us. We all feel this way. So don't give me this pious stuff about, oh, that's awful material. Just put your little halo down and set it on the seat next to you. Amen? Of course, we want to achieve and do things for the Lord and for our families. So life, liberty, and property, that's the other thing. So you can sum up the role of government like this. Stay out of our consciences and protect our life, liberty, and property. That's it. Yeah. Can you do that? Hey, Mr. Congressman, can you keep your nose out of my conscience? Would you mind doing that, please? Amen. And then secondly, can you go back to Washington and make sure my life, liberty, and property is okay? Stop stealing my property, please.
Amen.
Stop stealing my money. Stop stealing my liberty. Stop spying on me.
Amen.
Stop threatening to put me in detention without charging me with a crime.
Amen.
Stop it. Stop it. You're supposed to be protecting my liberty, not taking it from me. And every law that we've got, you know, I guess it was Republicans did this. They actually passed a provision because the 111th Congress is going to go down as the worst Congress in the history. Well, maybe this one will. Who knows? Maybe the next one will. But they passed a provision. They said that we will not pass a law unless we first read the bill.
Right.
Oh, thank you, guys. We really appreciate you doing that. That's kind of like McDonald's saying, we're not going to make a Big Mac from now on, we're not going to make a Big Mac unless there's beef in it. Thank you, guys. That's an amazing statement. The other thing that they promised is they're not going to pass a law unless they can cite the Constitution where it's in the Constitution. Well, bust my buttons here, guy. Thank you very much. I appreciate you actually, you know, that's a lot like a preacher saying, from now on, I'm actually going to use the Bible when I preach. Oh, never mind. Gotta be careful not to rail. It's hard not to rail, you know. And I'm not trying to rail. I'm just being sarcastic. Okay, I am. I'm just trying to poke fun. But unless that law is protecting my life, liberty, and property, it's useless. All it is extra laws that they're going to make people pay fines, maybe wind up in jail for no good reason. You know, I think we got enough laws. Somebody said the other day, boy, if we don't do something, the Congress is going to shut down. And I was like, I was waiting for this. All right. Now, where does the Triune Principle come from? And here is the rub. Okay, this is where the rubber's going to hit. You know, the Triune Principle does come from the Ten Commandments. And it's interesting. Okay, the Ten Commandments, this remarkable document in the book of Exodus. Although Leland said, I don't know why people are so enamored with the Ten Commandments. There's a whole lot more commandments than that in the Bible. But anyway, we'll stick with the Ten Commandments because it's so much in the news. I mean, it's almost like a racket. I sense a Ten Commandment racket out there. Don't you? Come on, you know when people have a racket going. It's a Ten Commandment racket going on out there. You know, Judge Roy Moore had to have the Ten Commandments removed. So here's how we're going to fight it. Buy a little pen that has the Ten Commandments. That'll fight it. You see the absurdity of some of this? Okay, I'm going to get me a Ten Commandment. I'm going to put this on here and it will stop homosexuality. No, it won't. You'll be out $10 and you'll have a little pin on your lip. That's what. That's right. I mean, we need to start thinking seriously. I'm going to vote for that guy because he's against abortion. And what is it going to do? You know that we had a president. By the way, I'm not against that. Okay, that's fine. I'm glad the guy's against abortion. But you know that a few years ago we had a president, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. They were all supposed to be pro-life. And what did they do about abortion? Nothing. And they never will.
That's right.
Because us stupid Christians actually believed them when they moved their mouth.
Yeah.
How can you tell when a politician's lying? Who's his mouth? All right. We're agreed on this. But the thing that's so beautiful about our system, the way it was originally set up, we talk about, okay, where did this Triune Principle come from? And where did this idea that you stay out of our conscience, where does it come from? Well, it comes from the Ten Commandments. Now, remember I mentioned Judge Roy Moore, and I think that Judge Roy Moore, who was the Supreme Court Justice, the head of the Supreme Court in Alabama, you know the story. He was in charge of the building there, the Supreme Court building, and he decided he was going to bring in a big hunk of granite that had the Ten Commandments on it. And he was going to bring the Ten Commandments in. Listen, everybody. And he did it. And then, of course, the ACLU, oh my goodness, we got to get God out of here. People are going to go blind. Oh! And so they sued to get the monument out. Listen, I got to tell you something. He was the Chief Justice, and according to the Constitution of Alabama, he could have put whatever he wanted there. If he wanted to put a statue of Charlie Brown and Snoopy in there, he could have, because he was in charge of the building, which might have been a good idea. But he didn't do it. He wanted to bring in this Ten Commandments, and you'd have thought that he took a machine gun and shot everybody. Okay? So guess what became the discussion? The discussion was over whether or not he could put the monument in there, if that would somehow violate church and state or whatever. It's ridiculous. He was in charge of the building. If he wanted to put it in there, he could have. And then the next Chief Justice could have came in and ripped it out if they wanted to. He's in charge of the building. Y'all follow what I'm saying? That was the bottom line. But again, everybody's arguing about the Ten Commandments now. So Roy Moore lost his job. And he sued to get it back. And he was sitting, listen folks, he was sitting trying to defend himself in the court. And the liberal judge is sitting here and he's asking him questions about the Ten Commandments. And the judge asked him, by the way, there's not a finer man on planet Earth than Roy Moore. He's a wonderful man. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not trying to criticize him. I think he's probably one of the best men in the country. But Roy Moore was sitting there, and Roy Moore said, of course, I think we should acknowledge God, and the Ten Commandments are the basis of our American jurisprudence. And the judge very wisely said, all 10 commandments. And he said, well, of course. And the judge immediately ruled against it. You say, well, why that? What? Good for nothing judge. Well, the judge happened to know a little bit about history here. The judge wasn't wrong to do it, and I'll tell you why. When we go back to this argument about the Ten Commandments, in the minds of the early American people, the Ten Commandments was divided into two parts. Okay? Society's view of the Ten Commandments. And their view of the Ten Commandments affected civil government ideas. Okay? In the days of the colonies, when discussing civil government, the Ten Commandments were divided into two tables. Now, our Baptist forefathers, such as Roger Williams and John Clark, they took the arguments of their dissenter forefathers and they contended that the first 5 commandments, our first table, could not be legislated by civil government. Did you follow what I just said?
Right.
Williams and Clark and the rest of these Baptists, they said civil government has no business involving itself in the first table of the law. And here's why. I mean, the guy that you work with down at wherever you work, you can't force them to believe the way you believe about the first table. You can't do that. Amen. You just can't. However, and we fought a big battle over this. Baptist people did. The second table, on the other hand, all right, first table, this is important. See that? It's important. Okay? The first 5 commandments, the first table, deal with man's relationship to God or the inner workings of the home. These commands are a part of the conscience. You see, I pastor a church. I have no idea who in my church is right with God.
Right.
I don't know. Only God knows, because it's the inner working of the Spirit. It's the inner working of the conscience. And even if they conform to everything I preach, I still don't know if they're right with God.
That's right.
Because people can outwardly conform, but on the inside be like dead man bones. We know that because Jesus said it.
That's right.
However, the remaining 5 commandments, our second table, deal with man's relationship to his fellow man. This is, you don't steal, you don't covet, you don't take, you don't destroy property, all these things, you don't lie, and these sorts of things, your dealings with your fellow man. And so the Baptists rightly judged that the second table belongs to civil government, not the first. And you know what, folks? They won the argument. Which is why you have religious liberty today.
Amen.
If we didn't have this battle over the first and second table, there would be no America as we know it today. It simply would not exist. Follow what I'm saying, everybody? So this is why the liberal judge looked at Roy Moore and said, I'm not ruling in your favor. Because he didn't even have a handle on the difference between the first and second table. That's why the man asked him the question. And this is why we fail sometimes in the public arena when we think somehow the role of government is to make people holy.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Amen.
It won't work. Stop trying it. It won't work.
Amen.
Somehow we think that somehow now I'm not talking about the fact that, there are some things that are definitely wrong, but those things that are wrong that deal on the civil level have to do with the second table of the law. If you go to Romans 13, you'll see what I'm saying, where the Lord tells us in Romans 13 that the magistrates are there to punish evildoers. Who are the evildoers? Those that violate the second table. Not the first table. The second table. Somebody steals from you, that's a violation of the second table. That's a civil matter that needs to be dealt with in civil courts and civil jurisprudence. When somebody takes the Lord's name in vain, that has to do with the church. Do you know if we do our job as a local church and the civil government does its job, it's a perfect blending of these two laws. And that's how society gets better. It doesn't get better because the government gets better. The government gets better because we get better.
Amen.
And if we mix these things up, we're going to go after the things that are not correct. And we're going to get very, very frustrated, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what's happening. Just restraining civil government from enforcing the first table is the fundamental principle supporting religious liberty. What Jefferson described as our most sacred of all inalienable rights. So protecting the Triune Principle is the second table of the law, and that's the role of government. And all I want to know, Mr. Santorum, is will you protect our life, liberty, and property? All I want to know, Mr. Gingrich, is will you protect my life, liberty, and property? All I want to know, Mr. Perry, oh, he's out of it now. Mr. Paul, whoever else is running, I don't even know anymore. A couple of them dropped out recently. Are you going to protect my life, liberty, and property? Are you going to obey that Constitution that the purpose of the Constitution is to protect life, liberty, and property? Okay. I don't know if I got anything else to say. Maybe I do. Let me push the button and see. Hey, yeah, look at the Triune Principle. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's the inner man. Okay? That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the second table. You say, well, Jefferson must have been a Christian. Do you understand that it really doesn't matter?
Amen.
Somebody sent me a book, 1,500 pages. I mean, I read a lot, okay? I don't want to read it. I want to read the book. I don't. Because it's 1,500 pages trying to prove that George Washington was a Christian. I got to tell you, it really doesn't matter.
Amen.
Because I'm more concerned about what George Washington said about civil government than I am what he said about God. Now, I happen to think that George Washington was a Christian. And you know that most of the founding fathers were Christians. Okay, but don't get caught up in this rhetoric about, they were all Christians. They weren't.
That's right.
And it wasn't required that they all be Christians. It was required that they understood the second table of the law. That's what was required. And they understood it.
Amen.
They understand it better than those that claim to know God and run for office.
Amen.
John Leland said, beware of the man that speaks. Beware the man that runs for office who speaks much of God. He said, because he will use God to get into office, and there can't be a worse scoundrel on planet Earth.
Amen.
He's right. He's right. So, I hope you understand a little bit of what's happening and maybe where we have gone off in our society and so forth. Don't violate the conscience. Protect my life, liberty, and property. Amen. By the way, do you remember, and I'll close with this. You remember in the last election, it was 2 elections ago, for the Senate, we had a Muslim run for Congress. Remember that? Keith Ellison from Minnesota. And everybody was up in arms. Remember why they were up in arms? They were up in arms because when he was going to swear to uphold the Constitution, he was going to put his hand on the Quran.
Yeah.
Everybody was up, oh, how dare him put his hand on the Quran, without even thinking about really what the principles were. I mean, everybody was upset about this. I mean, people throwing stuff around, getting mad, writing letters, because he's going to put his hand on the Quran instead of the Bible. Well, Keith Ellison is a Muslim. How would you like it if somebody was swearing you into office and they said you had to put your hand on the Quran? You probably wouldn't do that, would you? The point is, and the problem is, it didn't matter what book he swore, it's what he swore.
Right.
What do you swear when you become a congressman? You don't swear to uphold the Apostle Paul.
Right.
Okay, what you do is you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And if he can swear it, and then we watch his behavior to see if he really is doing that, then he can serve.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, he can.
Amen.
Yes, he can. I know what Mark Levine says. I know he's really upset at this. He's upset at me. He's mad at me. But nevertheless, it's the truth that Mark Levine should know, as being a Jew, that the Jewish people in this country have liberty. just like Christians do. Now, I'm not saying, let's not be careful, because we know that there's an element, just like the Catholics,
Yeah.
there's an element among the Muslims that would try to marry the church and the state to their Sharia law.
Amen.
And when that begins to happen, we got to know these principles to understand there cannot be Sharia law established in this country because there is a separation from ecclesiastical government and civil government. We cannot lose our principles simply because we get scared
Right.
or frightened. We cannot approach this from an emotional standpoint. It has to be what the principles say. And the principles say no Sharia law. If you want to have a little court in your own church and discipline people according to your first table, fine. If you think you can read their minds, go ahead. But if you're going to punish somebody because they stole from somebody else, that's where our civil government system comes in. And we're not going to be separate. Otherwise, you have to go form your own country. Amen? And that's how we need to think about it, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Any questions? I'm finished, preacher. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Curious. A lot of information here. Anybody want to argue? I love to argue. Okay, yes.
Got this.
I don't know. I'm curious. But, how do we fix it?
We have to restate the principles. That's number one. And what is so frustrating is that you have well-meaning conservatives that keep writing book after book after book after book, and they do not understand the first and second table, and they're writing books that are flawed in their argumentation concerning what the role of government is. Okay. So we Baptist people, and by the way, if our country has looked to the Baptist people for direction in this, and they're looking to us right now, and they're failing miserably. Our colleges, our so-called leadership of the Baptist movement in this country. So we have to write. We have to write things. We have to write about the first and second table. We have to educate, especially our own children, so that they can recognize the flawed argument. So it's a tough road. It's kind of like Baptist history itself. When I started traveling around about 7 years ago trying to inform the leadership of the Baptist movement, and most of them said, oh, that's nice, get out of here. But a lot of individual preachers did get a hold of their heritage again, so it's very encouraging. So right now there is a movement among young people to try to get these principles of liberty back. Okay, it's not a perfect movement, there's a lot of bad in it, but at the core, they're at least going back to the Constitution and asking the right questions. Is this constitutional? Is this the right way? The Tea Party was a knee-jerk reaction to that. The Tea Party began to ask, is Obamacare constitutional? You know how long it had been before that phrase was in the American psyche, if you please? In my lifetime, hardly anybody ever talked about the Constitution. And here we are having the Tea Party actually asking, where in the Constitution do we actually have a warrant to take money from people by force to pay for somebody else's health care?
Commerce clause.
Well, it's not in there. Well, you can use the Commerce Clause if you want to, but the Commerce Clause was explained by Madison in the Federalist Papers. And it has absolutely nothing to do with providing goods and services. The common good is when you protect the liberty of everybody, then that's promoting the common good. In other words, if you really wanted to promote the economy in this country, you don't get up and you say, we're going to create jobs. No. Politicians don't create jobs. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, you liars? Okay, what we can do is we can say, we're going to get the EPA off your back, and we're going to get the CDC off your back. We're going to get all these agencies off your back and out of your life so that you can start a business. We're going to get the IRS out of your pocket.
Amen.
Everything you try to do, we tax and tax and tax. You know, and we're going to do away with that. If they really, really wanted to stimulate the economy, that's the approach they would take.
Yeah.
Do you know that there's a lot of people that won't start their businesses until they know if Obama's coming back in office?
Yeah.
They don't want to start the business because they don't want to get involved in all of the paperwork that's already pretty heavy, and it was heavy before he ever got in office. But there's even more now concerning healthcare. And you know, when you take somebody's money without asking them, they used to call that stealing.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it's in violation of the second table. So anyway, anybody else? That's a good question. Anybody? Yes, sir.
How involved should we get in creating these principles back? I know you said right and so forth. I mean, how, I guess, there's a perception that not to say that it's here necessarily, but there's often a perception in the world that church people, pastors specifically, should be involved in politics as much as politicians should.
Well, my answer to that is, I'm not involved in politics because I'm a pastor. I'm involved in politics because I'm a citizen. I have a right to be involved as a citizen. And for somebody to say, you pastors, you shouldn't be playing politics. I'm not playing. I mean this. They're the ones that are playing. They're the ones that try to pit, we got to figure out who two guys who get pit against each other so we can all get beer and watch them fight. You know, that is what politics has become in this country. That's what news has become in this country. Trying to use people that'll body slam each other and then you put the camera on them so you can sell more skinny jeans from Walmart. You know. So to answer your question, you know, you get involved by writing letters, but writing letters, all you get is a form letter back, but it is important that you register complaints. The greatest thing, two things, the two greatest things we can do right now is every time your representative or your senator comes to this area, you need to go to the meetings and ask them point blank, this bill was passed, how in the world does that protect my life, liberty, and property? And you begin to ask those kinds of questions. Once one person starts asking questions like that, people begin to say, hey, yeah, that's right. That's the role of government. Why, you guys are off. You know? And once one or two people begin to think that way and begin to talk that way, then other people begin to pick up on it. And so that's what you can do. The other thing you can do is there is a movement in this country called Nullification. And it's something that I think every Christian ought to look into. It has to do when the federal government pushes too much on the states. And the states have a right to nullify federal law if they think it's infringing their life, liberty, and property. And there's a movement. You can go on the web and just look up nullification. Nullification. And if you can get involved with that, I think it'll do you some good. And there are numbers of nullification rallies, and what happens at these rallies is people come and get educated. You know, and we need that education so that when these congressmen come, we can actually ask them pointed questions that have meaning, and maybe they'll start thinking a little bit. Maybe. And if they don't come around to this kind of thinking, then we need to boot them and put people in there that will understand these principles of liberty. But it happens one at a time. It's very important. John Leland was so involved in, you say involved in government, he was a tremendous revivalist. He baptized more people in America other than Shubal Stearns, but yet he was personal friends with Madison. And it was Leland's influence on Madison that gave rise to the Bill of Rights. So this is the influence of one preacher, one Baptist preacher, that gave us the Bill of Rights. That's a fact of history. So we got to talk. Talk it up. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I was in one meeting. I went to this meeting. Our congressman came in and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have the stimulus package. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And a lady raised her hand and said, well, how are we going to pay for this? Good question. He said, well, what we're going to do is blah, blah. And he never answered the question. So he goes on to the next question with somebody else, and I hollered out, you never answered the question. And it got his attention. So he went back and he said, well, yes, I did. I answered the question, blah, blah, blah. And then everybody said, no, you didn't. And it's that kind of thing. And I'm not saying to be rude, but if they're not going to answer the question, they're working for us. We're not working for them.
That's right.
You slave, you. No, you're not a slave. They're working for us. And if they don't listen to what we're saying, then we fire them. It's as simple as that. If they don't listen to us, hey, we're shooting. I mean, that's just ridiculous. You know, and the media will say, well, there's pretty rude people at these meetings. Do you blame them for being rude?
Amen.
You've been trampled on for all these years, your money's stolen from you. Now, look, these children right here, they're going to have to pay for the stupid stimulus package. They will. We'll never pay it off. They'll have to pay for it. That doesn't make you mad? I'm getting mad thinking about it right now.
Amen.
You shouldn't be mad. I don't know. You know, I don't know. I'm not Jesus, but he got a little angry
That's right.
at these things that were blatantly wrong. So, anybody else have a question? It's a really good question. Yeah, sir?
Yeah. Before I say, I would say I'm working against it. In reference to protect life, liberty, and property, what do we do about the 16th Amendment?
I don't know what you mean. What do you
The
mean?
16th Amendment states that Congress has the power to levy an income tax.
Yeah. Well, I think that we ought to get rid of that. I think we ought to. I think that we ought to find some way to repeal it. There's a list of about 10 things that I think are intolerable. That's one of them. The Patriot Act is intolerable. The fact that the American people have tolerated this is absolutely unbelievable. The creation of Viper teams and so forth, the Department of Homeland Security and all the things that they've added, more government, these things are intolerable. They need to be done away with. So we need a president and a Congress that's got the courage to get rid of these things. But you're right about the income tax. We didn't have the income tax until 1913. The only reason we have an income tax now is to pay, basically it pays the interest on the national debt. It doesn't even pay the national debt. It just pays the interest on the national debt. The national debt was created so that we will be perpetually in debt.
Mm-hmm.
And the Fed. Get rid of it.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do something very interesting, check out the monetary and the foreign policy of every president that was either assassinated or there was an attempt on his life. Those foreign, so you're a conspiracist. No, it's just so obvious it's not even funny. Andrew Jackson, the attempt on Jackson's life, Jackson was the one that ended the central bank.
Amen.
Amen.
Jackson's life, Jackson was the last one to destroy the public debt, get rid of the public debt, and somebody tried to shoot him. Do the math. You don't have to be Columbo either. You know what Columbo is? Yeah, I got a question. You know, you don't have to be Columbo here. You should be able to figure it out. It's a racket.
Right.
It's a racket. It needs to stop. Anybody else? Don't throw things at me yet. Let me get out of the building before you start criticizing. Okay. Anybody else? Maybe I'm preaching to the choir here. I don't know. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
When we talk to people, people have no idea. And when you start any kind of conversation, people really have, they aren't basing any of their decisions at all based upon what any perceived amount of liberty is. That they only take it from an emotional side.
Yeah.
How do you have any idea of how to pierce through that with
Yeah.
people that you talk to?
Yes, and I've thought about it a lot. Information is what helps people because eventually people start thinking. Most people don't like to think outside the box because they're comfortable in that box. So sometimes you have to say something to make them a little angry. So they start thinking outside the box a little bit. But as far as civil government concepts and principles are concerned, I always argue one thing, and that is what is the role of government? You tell me, what is the role of government? And based on their answer, you should say, no, that's not the role of government, and was not the role of government. What you're describing to me is a 20th century phenomenon, you know, or it's a 19th century phenomenon. This is not what the founders said. All we're supposed to have is a government that operates in such a way that it protects our life, liberty, and property, and all these extra things are just not constitutional. And when you bring it back to the role of government and the Constitution, they cannot even argue it. They'll just call you a name. Is what they'll do. But that's what I'm doing. The only thing that I can do is just go back to the role of government. What is it? Yes.
The same concept as what you were saying. Oftentimes when you talk to people, they take the conversation in the direction of emotions, terrorism. What's really driven the increase in government lately has been, or the last 10 years has been the whole terrorism. The terrorism idea. The idea that we have terrorists everywhere, we've got to get them. And anybody that's not for getting the terrorists aren't considered seriously. They're not considered serious candidates for political office, serious patriots or anything like that. So I guess you answered the question by taking them back to the reason why, is our role as the United States government is our responsibility to go everywhere in all the world to get the terrorists? What's the purpose of our government?
Well, that's exactly right. And the more that you say that, you might get made fun of, but people will begin to think. Most of the American people don't want our soldier boys and girls 4,000 to 5,000 miles away, fighting when there's not even an enemy. There's not an army to fight. So it's very frustrating for them. They're trying to serve their country, and they go over there, and their assignment is what? It's very difficult. And there's a number of them that come back cuckoo. They just come back. They're losing their minds. So you go back to the role of government. And the role of government is certainly is not for us to invade every country that we think might hurt us.
Amen.
I spoke in Virginia, about 10 miles away from the headquarters of the Department of Homeland Security. I was preaching in a meeting, and they advertised it in the area that I was going to come and speak on American Principle. And a couple people from the Department of Homeland Security showed up. And as this was a Baptist meeting, we had chicken afterwards. And I was eating chicken, and one of these Department of Homeland Security guys sat across from me, and they said, this guy said, I take umbrage on what you said in there. I said, oh yeah, what did I say? What did I say you didn't like? He said, well, you're talking about the Patriot Act, saying this was a bad thing. I said, it is a very bad thing. He said, well, I work for the Department of Homeland Security. I happen to think it's a very good thing. I said, why? Why do you think it's a good thing? Tell me why you think it's a good thing. He said, we need to stop these people before they do something. We need to stop them before they do something. I said, okay, listen, you need to listen to your self-talk.
Amen.
I said, are you telling me that we should incarcerate people because we think they might do something? You do know there's a Fourth Amendment. Do you know what's in the Fourth Amendment? You cannot incarcerate someone without probable cause. You cannot keep somebody a prisoner without charging them. And chicken was coming out of my mouth. Because it's just absolute madness.
Amen.
It's madness. And a lot of my Baptist preacher friends, they think I'm the one that's crazy, but I'm not.
Amen.
If we invade Iran, it's going to provoke China. Is that what you want? Is that really what you want? You better think about this.
Amen.
Yes.
I agree to that.
Yeah.
It would go Fourth Amendment if they're an American citizen. I don't believe that we should. I don't believe that we need to read Miranda rights to enemy combatants. Those types of things. I think
If they're not an American citizen?
Yeah, if they're not an American citizen.
If they're not American.
But at what point do you justify the use of force against a foreign power? For instance, in Iran, they burn the American flag, they scream death to America, and they are developing nuclear weapons. At one point in time, do you think, okay, I don't want to commit ground troops, but maybe I should bomb the snot out of their nuclear facilities to keep them from passing those things off to people that would do us harm? I mean, at what point do we have to justify preemptive measures by what you're saying? I mean, at what point can we say, look, the writing's on the wall, this foreign power, it's in their belief system that we are infidels, they want to destroy us. They're developing nuclear weapons. At what point do you say, okay, we have to defend ourselves? Is it after a mushroom cloud goes up? I mean, that's the whole fear factor. And I understand the whole, the government uses the fear factor in order to control us.
Yeah, it is.
So, because, they understand that power is absolutely nothing without control.
All right, so let's go back to the first question,
Yes.
which is detaining somebody that's not an American citizen. Up until 9/11, if we suspected somebody had committed a crime, they were not an American citizen, we would turn them over to the country of their origin. This is what we would do. And I think we should still do that.
I agree.
We shouldn't be detaining them using our tax money, to detain somebody and keep them alive for a period of time or whatever. But if they're not being charged with it, we should charge them and take them back as we did before 9/11 happened. We should continue that practice. So yeah, I mean, if somebody we have evidence that they've done this. My problem is there's no evidence and we just suspect it. I don't see how you could hold anybody when you just suspect it. Okay, and
I agree.
that's all I'm trying to say. Now, if there's evidence, of course, if there's evidence, you take it to a grand jury and you charge the person. That's how our criminal justice system works. If you have a foreigner, you turn them over to that foreign government. If that foreign government doesn't prosecute that person, then we have other things that go into play. And I don't know all of them because I'm not a lawyer. My point is when somebody's not being charged and it's just suspicion. If somebody's being called an enemy combatant, it is a well-known fact that the Patriot Act gives the president the authority to declare somebody an enemy combatant. And let me go a step further with this. The reason why there isn't more of an uproar is in the Patriot Act, those that have been arrested under the Patriot Act cannot tell anyone that they've been arrested under the Patriot Act, and that's why you don't see it on CNN, you don't see it on MSNBC, you don't see it because under normal circumstances,